The story begins with a young Korean man called Mr. Kim, commonly known as Pet Shop, monologuing about special skills. Pet Shop remembers when the hunter told him about the warlord General Lightning wanting some gorillas. Since the client only wanted the head and hands, he readily agreed. The duo set off the next day, and Mr. Kim thinks of all the risks, including the local warlord's goons and armed rebel forces. Mildly irritated, he asks his partner if they're going the right way. The hunter reassures him quite aggressively, only to get surrounded by a bunch of soldiers. He reveals his identity as Eddie Montoya, in Korean no less, and arrests Kim after 10 long years of tailing. On the police van, Pet Shop asks if the poaching and General Lightning were all part of his plan, which Eddie confirms. He explains how he kept up his act for 6 months, only to be interrupted by a call. The caller warns him about 2 moons, followed by the whole van rattling as Pet Shop transforms, freaking out the soldiers who start shooting him. The monster slaughters everyone in that van, including Eddie, who calls him a monster. Kim then exits the van to witness the eerie 2 moons. Mr. Kim was betrayed, arrested, and now alone in an alien world. Regardless, he concludes it for the best, as he was an international criminal constantly on the run in the old world. He does not consider himself human anyway, and is soon attacked by a pack of wolves. He morphs into a tiger hybrid and attacks, killing the alpha and eating it. Realizing that common knowledge does not apply here, he spends a week in this forest feasting away with each catch. He ventures forth to discover the common knowledge unique to this world, running into a man speaking a foreign language. Mr. Kim just kills and eats him, granting him access to man's memories. He now knew this foreign language and even found a guide to monsters as a bonus. From this, he learns of various monsters and systems, and begins experimenting on his victims for 2 months. The panel shifts to a disembodied troll being used for tests beyond the limitations of the guide. Meanwhile, at the Onyx Oaks clan, we see a blonde human man speaking to an orc about a prophecy on the most powerful monster that eats every creature and absorbs their skills. A group of trolls stumble upon human tracks while looking for their missing patrol. Angered at the thought of being denied human flesh, they start scouting the area and come across Pet Shop's cave. By the time they smell troll blood, it's too late, and Mr. Kim makes quick work of the 3 trolls using various combinations of monsters he had assimilated. The Prodigy continues his experiments for months, but still feels alienated about skills. Similar to video games, he concludes that he is immune to the skills of this world, and yet his attacks are lethal on creatures here. His dream of becoming the most powerful creature is actually plausible here, where humanity's science and weaponry is absent. The focus shifts to a lone slime experiencing a dragon's flight overhead. It rejoices about being born in a fantasy world with the ability to consume and absorb anything at the cost of its soul. It starts consuming creatures left and right, plotting its eventual world domination. This slime is fated to be a great rival, whose stupidity would become the end of it. The Elmwood continent exists under a goddess and her warrior. This warrior defends humanity and abides by a sacred code, but even he couldn't stop the monster of destruction. After he died, he reopened his eyes 10 years in the past. Vowing to stop the monster, he reveals the future under the guise of a prophecy to the Orc Elder. He explains the existence of a monster who kills and absorbs creatures, and how it must be stopped. The Elder warns him that it's too late, as the trolls had already disappeared. The warrior recalls the distinct characteristics the monster possessed, similar to trolls, and pursues their trail. Mr. Kim's experiments killed all the trolls except his first victim, who pleads for death. As he scribbles down notes on his guide, he decides to use his blood for healing potions instead. He soon sets his eyes on lizardmen and heads to the swamp area. He makes quick work of some lizardmen and eats them, while the slime feasts on an orc elsewhere. This slime then happens upon Pet Shop's cave, crawling with monster carcasses, and starts eating away as well. This happiness is short-lived though, as the goddess of warrior appears behind him. The warrior senses evil within the slime, who proceeds to throw questions and insults at him. Thinking of himself as an OP protagonist, the slime complains about getting him rather than a dragon to consume. The warrior draws his sword after this meager monster insults the divine goddess. Mildly shaken, it proclaims that it'll devour the warrior for his skills, only to get sliced in half. It survives thanks to the troll's region, but the warrior concludes that this is the future calamity and uses a huge ray of holy light, final judgment, to decimate it and leaves. Meanwhile, Pet Shop attacks more lizardmen for his experiments and ferries them back to his cave. The slime had barely survived and sought out something to eat, only to be met by a returning Mr. Kim. He is enraged by the disappearance of his subjects, but the slime leaps at his face, considering him food. The slime monologues about his life thus far, how he was a useless human who didn't even have a job when he was 40. He woke up as a slime in this world, considering himself his chosen hero. He leaps right at Pet Shop's mouth, planning to eat its way out, only to get assimilated by him. Mr. Kim is no longer able to use the cave as the slime contaminated it, but he can now use the slime's skill of transforming and evolving based on what it eats. Now he could eat a wider range of things, including plants, dirt, and ores. Thus, he is now able to absorb minerals and even turn himself into metal. At the dragon territory, a nameless red dragon descends upon its lair. Other creatures call her the Scarlet Blaze, but to her baby, she is simply Mom. She goes out to scout the area and is angered by the sight of lizardmen blood, beings who fall under her protection. Meanwhile, Pet Shop contemplates the use of lizardmen mucus to absorb a sturdy metal. He pinpoints a location up a mountain, but needs to get past orc territory to get there. He thinks about how to get the orcs to leave the mines when the dragon flies overhead. Knowing about the dragon baby from the lizardman's memories, Mr. Kim hatches a cruel plan. The mother dragon drops food off in her lair and commands her baby to stay put. She puts up a barrier spell and leaves the nest, only for Pet Shop to appear there within seconds. The barrier doesn't work on him because he's technically an alien here, and he easily reaches the baby dragon while looking like an orc. He ignores the baby and looks at all the treasures gathered there, metals incomparable to those in the mines. He then attacks the baby, who lunges at him. The mother dragon returns with no info on the intruder and is distraught by the sight of her baby injured. She uses healing magic to save him, who quickly tells her about a red creature who attacked him and stole all their food and treasure. Firmly believing the orcs to be the culprits, she lets out a bone-chilling roar. A patrol orc brings a bloodied artifact dagger he found in a bush nearby to their elder. By the time he realizes the blood on it is of dragon origin, the mother had already begun her attack. Smelling the blood of her baby on the dagger, the mother dragon began massacring every orc in sight. All the orcs in the Great Forest battled the dragon for days, emerging victorious with far too many casualties. The remainder left the forest, leaving behind a feast for Pet Shop. The baby dragon soon realizes its mother is dead, undergoing a minor evolution as it sets off from the den. At this point, Pet Shop has already eaten every monster mentioned in the guide and leaves the forest on a peddler's cart, claiming to be suffering from memory loss. The peddler's idle chit-chat garnered him more info about this world, but he still couldn't use the status window. Pet Shop disembarks at the gate to Santo Canargo City, buzzing with life and surprisingly clean. He overhears two men talking about how the second eldest prince grew up here and had discovered the correlation between hygiene and disease as a kid. This prince is also going to visit the city for his coming-of-age ceremony. Pet Shop wonders about the possibility that someone else from Earth could be living here as well. It was only a matter of time before he met this prince, a man with a familiar face, Eddie Montoya himself. Eddie Montoya was a second-generation Latino born in the US. He was working as an investigator for the unaffiliated Special International Police Force and a secret agent for the CIA before meeting his demise at the hands of Pet Shop. He'd reopened his eyes as a child, the second eldest prince of the kingdom of Grand Contine, Edward. His knowledge from Earth were godly powers in this medieval world, and it was only a matter of time before he became king. He takes residence in the Lord of Santo Canargo's manor during his visit. While relaxing on his bed, he notices a lizardman crawl in through the window. Pet Shop reverts to his human form to greet Edward, but he faints, believing this to be a nightmare. A servant promptly enters the room to find a lone Edward sprawled across the bed. Seeing his chance, he pulls out a knife to assassinate the prince, but is stopped by a large, stuffed animal bear. Pet Shop kills the assassin instead, prompting guards to barge into the room. The guards opt to kill both him and Edward, so he grabs the prince and leaps out the window. Meanwhile, the Lord is informed that Edward was kidnapped by a monster, and he in turn mobilizes all troops to save the prince. While Pet Shop rests on the outskirts of the city, Edward finally wakes up only to dramatically faint again. Pet Shop and Edward discuss the context of their revivals. Pet Shop assures that he won't kill Edward, since he already paid the price for his betrayal. He starts talking about how General Lightning must be taking all the credit now, while Eddie and his squad pay the ultimate price. Clearly ticked off, Edward throws camaraderie to the wind and decides to work together with Pet Shop. He plans to send Pet Shop back to kill his betrayers, while Pet Shop plans to use him for information and a means of returning home. Pet Shop tells Edward about the assassination attempt, but he remarks he is used to it. Thus, they head back to the manor. The first king, Edward the Great, had once stayed in an inn on the outskirts of Carnarvon where he was impressed by the innkeeper's services. He was granted the title of Baron, and House of Baron Carnarvon came into power, becoming one of the 5 most powerful families on the continent. Since the family only flourishes under the royal authority, the Baron would devote everything for the throne. The assassin guard and Baron are informed that the prince returned on his own. Edward stands before the gate beside an armored red orc, ordering them to withdraw their troops. He informs them of the assassination attempt and how he was saved by his secret guardian knight, Sir Kim. The guard counters that the prince must have been threatened, but an enraged Edward proclaims his proud lineage and unshaken will. The Baron then calmly orders the guards to be arrested. Edward confronts the restrained guards and threatens them with torture, promising no peaceful deaths. To add to his horror, Pet Shop lifts his faceplate to reveal the bear underneath. Before coming to the manor, Pet Shop coated some old armor with slime mucus and converted it into mystium. This helped convince the Baron of his identity as the secret guardian knight. The torture assassins revealed themselves to be the Mort Messengers, meaning messenger of death. Going off what he learned from Edward, Pet Shop tells the Baron about how the second queen, Everose, was poisoned to death at their hands. Despite the Baron's determination to enact revenge, Pet Shop forces him to back down and states that it is his responsibility alone as a knight. Pet Shop then leaves the room while the Baron begs him to protect Edward. Pet Shop asks Edward about the Mort Messengers, but he states that he already knows who they are and that they'll meet the ringleader at the capital. He asks Edward about the status window, who states that all living creatures on the continent have access to one. The Identify skill allows Edward to peek at others' status windows, but it doesn't appear when he uses it on Pet Shop's human form. However, it pops up when he transforms into a creature of this world. Giddy with excitement, Pet Shop combines multiple monsters to watch his stats skyrocket. At one point, it became stagnant at NULL, implying that he was a bug in the system. The duo arrive at the capital and prepare to meet the leader of the Mort Messengers. Pet Shop is definitely surprised to discover that the ringleader is none other than the king himself. Edward greets the king, who pretends to be happy for his safety. Edward casually credits it to the attendants his father sent, but the tension is far too high. Impressed by Pet Shop's guts, the king asks Edward to give Sir Kim to him. But Edward refuses under the pretext that Kim is not an object to be gifted, and that they are best friends. They then share a good laugh that greatly angers the king. Sharing a drink, Edward thanks Pet Shop for everything, especially about managing to confuse and terrify the king. The king has a practice of training nationwide orphans to become anything ranging from basic servants to intel gatherers and assassins. They are then planted in houses of royal families and nobility to remove any obstacles. The duo are interrupted by Princess Eleanor, Edward's sister, who barges into the room. Kim stops and accuses her of trespassing, drawing his sword when she yells back. Frightened, she falls to the floor to be comforted by Edward. He butters her up and sends her back, cursing her once she's gone. Apparently, she is blessed with the goddess' power to go wherever she wishes, making her a priority elimination target. This doesn't change the fact that she's romantically interested in her half-brother Edward, though. Edward explains how Everose, his mother, was poisoned by the first queen, Eleanor's mother. Confused, Pet Shops asks why he's fighting the king, and Edward replies that it's because of the firstborn son. Furthermore, Edward can only talk about him in his presence or after being granted his permission. All of this due to his oath to the goddess. After his coming-of-age ceremony, Edward is proven to be worthy of the throne. But he needs to win over people loyal to the king first. He suddenly bumps into someone and falls. This person is revealed to be the warrior from before, Edward's brother. The king had assassinated all his brothers to seize the throne, so Edward's sworn brother talk irritates him to no end. He contemplates how he educated each of his surviving 3 children. His eldest son, righteous and wise to be king. Edward to eliminate obstacles, and Eleanor for an arranged marriage. But Edward was too cunning and hated his people, while his eldest son was chosen as the warrior. At this point, he'd rather have Eleanor succeed the throne rather than Edward. The warrior calls everyone to the audience chamber and announces that the goddess bestowed him the power of holy light. While everyone is utterly shocked, he announces his expedition in 1 week's time and requests the military support. Edward is infuriated by the turn of events. He explains how humans and demons maintain a balance via the goddess's mediation, albeit being hostile to each other. If the scale tips, a warrior is born on the other side to remedy the imbalance. If his efforts don't bear fruit, he is given the power of holy light to slay the enemy ruler, the demon king, without backlash from the gods. As humanity is in danger now, Edward must fight in the war. As expected, the king commands Edward to defeat the demon king with the warrior. He and Kim promptly leave in a carriage, determined to defeat their enemy and return. The king deploys soldiers on horses to kill Edward, but their attempts to break the barrier go haywire and their numbers dwindle left and right. A dragon hybrid Pet Shop steps out of the carriage and lets out a mind domination roar that affects the horses. He uses dragon fire on the attackers, whose blades shatter upon contacting his raw hide. Edward finishes off the escapees with quantum rays via his light magic. 2 days later, the duo arrive at a village to meet the warrior's men. Edward contemplates how the king must have scheduled their rides for the assassination attempt in advance. Pet Shop wonders about their upcoming one-sided battle, but Edward answers that the goddess will not punish the demon king for killing the warrior either. This has never happened, though, because it would mean the end of humanity. It's all about survival of the fittest. Edward talks about a monster he knows, called a saintess, as a woman appears behind him. This woman, the saintess, wonders if Edward is being blasphemous with his words. The two continue to exchange insults, eventually taking it outside. Seeing how this was bad for Edward's reputation, Pet Shop bribes the people with gold to keep silent and leaves. The temple uses blessings and magic to create a single saintess over the course of many years. A completed saintess is almost invincible with superhuman physical abilities. An angry Edwards ponders how he saw her potential first back when she was a mere servant and planned to make her his royal guard. The two scramble for a while, but no clear winner emerges. After the saintess leaves, Pet Shop berates Edward about not agreeing to be his nanny. The warrior arrives on foot, greets everyone humbly, and formally introduces himself to Kim. Stating that the demon king should be extremely powerful, he asks if everyone is willing to risk their lives. Everyone agrees, but are interrupted by the demon general Arrogance, Francis de Freyrode. He informs them that they're in demon territory and sends out a wave which transforms the civilians into werewolves. Francis knows these lower-class demons cannot bring the order down, but uses them to determine his foe's abilities. Edward uses a sword and shield made of light to attack, while evading via acrobatics. The saintess is proficient in many spells, but prefers to use deadly brute strength. The warrior goes by the books, hesitating before slaying a child werewolf. Meanwhile, Kim casually appears behind Francis and caws him. Elsewhere, a group of demons contemplate the loss of the weakest of the 7 generals, ascertaining that their enemies are fairly powerful. Apparently, the title of the 7 deadly generals is actually a cover for the 4 great kings. They claim that the destruction of humanity is inevitable because they've already exceeded the limits set by the goddess. The order brings down all the werewolves. The warrior recognizes him as the general in charge of gathering intel. Edwards ponders how they got an important kill, but Francis' unpreparedness hints at him being expendable. Kim feasts on the werewolves to increase his compatibility with mammals and asks to eat Francis too. Contemplating these events, Edward and Kim wonder how demon societal structure must have shifted massively for their intel gatherer to become disposable. Kim points out that there might be a third person who came from Earth in the demon kingdom. Edward thus proposes using this third to wipe out both the warrior and saintess. The order gives all the werewolves to formal burial and prayers. They find a carriage in the temple of the goddess and set off, with Edward at the reins. Edward starts talking about how to kill the warrior in Russian. Kim contemplates how he instantly knew the warrior wasn't someone who'd die easily, making him his toughest foe. Edward explains that the warrior is the most righteous, just and good-hearted person, but losing any of these qualities will weaken him enough for Kim to handle him. He also states that everything will naturally fall into place in demon territory. The saintess interrupts, prompting the two to start squabbling again. Kim's turn to ride inside the carriage arrives, where the warrior asks how he became Edward's guardian knight. He expresses favoritism for his brother, invoking the wrath of the sacred code. Kim simply states that he is under contract. To this, the warrior assumes he's after the reward for defeating the Demon King. The order arrives at Fortress City, located within 12 miles of the Demon Kingdom. They part ways in a tavern, where Kim informs Edward about the reward. The goddess will grant one wish to each person who aided in slaying the Demon King. Edward is more than just elated to hear this. Edward starts puking after having the drinks, but Kim notices everyone else has too. Meanwhile, the warrior is attacked by civilians who are under the control of Thoris the Glutterud, one of the 7 generals. This demon had added parasite eggs into the city's water supply, thus taking over the minds of the hosts. But the warrior cannot harm the civilians as per the sacred code. Edward and the saintess are under the mind control too, but Kim suddenly starts beating them both up. He knocks them out, leaves them under the warrior's care, and proceeds to massacre the civilians. Ferris starts panicking, questioning how a knight can mercilessly kill so many innocents. Kim blames it on him for controlling them, forcing him to withdraw the mind control. But Kim continues pummeling people to reach Ferris' own body atop the city wall. He attempts to flee, but Kim catches him and smiles at the prospect of acquiring all his skills. Ferris contemplates how he's never met such a monster before, willing to kill his own and completely lacking in morals. He lunges at Kim's head, planning to acquire complete control via his powers. Kim meets Ferris with ease, who dissolves away within. Happy about being able to control humans to an extent now, he bites off a finger, which converts to a parasite under his control. He obtains the base skill, but it needs further development to be practically usable. At the Demon Castle, the demons discuss Gluttony's death at the hands of an insane monster tagging alongside the prince. The only general left is Wrath, but they're saving him to deal with the allied human forces. Unfortunately, Wrath had already set off. The warrior is not happy about Kim's methods, but accepts it was the most effective way. He asks if the slaughter could have been avoided, but Kim shows no trace of guilt. The warrior's train of thought is interrupted by the appearance of the mountainous demon named Dracus, here to avenge Ferris. Edward tells of a demon warrior who rode Dracus to battle half a century ago, but Dracus had continued to grow, becoming far bigger than a dragon at this point. While they marvel at the beast, Dracus uses its massive tail to level the entire forest before smashing their carriage to smithereens. Angered, Dracus asks if they killed Ferris, but decides to decimate all insects, anyway for revenge. It attacks them with its massive tail, rendering all their skills useless. They all turn to Kim, who seems to have a plan. Forged through experience, Dracus is no fool either. It uses detection, sweeps the area, and intercepts enemies at long range. The warrior dashes at the enemy head-on with the Holy Sword, which only shows its full potential if it's up against evil. Since revenge isn't exactly evil, he is just using a regular sword. Dracus uses its flexible tail to attack at short range, dealing damage with the aftershock. Regardless, he shouts that their plan worked. Their plan was for the warrior to distract Dracus while Kim approached it from underground. He's aiming for a scar on the beast's underside, since its detection won't work on him. Asking for only 5 minutes max, the warrior trusts him thanks to his lie detection skill. Thus, Kim successfully reaches the scar. Dracus is dumbfounded that its detection didn't work while Kim prepares his dragon claws. It attempts to body slam Kim, but he pierces through before impact. Inside the beast, Kim tries out his parasite skills, which feed all information back to him. He tears through the flesh and finds an organ while Dracus frails about apologizing. It falls down dead as Kim appears out of one of its eyes. These events put the warrior and Saintess on edge about Kim, who ponders how Dracus was mostly just size. Regardless, he obtained its insane lung capacity to enhance his dragon breath, small hearts and blood vessels to pump blood even if the main heart is destroyed, and the ability to somehow fly. Back at the Demon Castle, only the 4 Great Kings are left now. It's all according to plan it seems, leading the warrior straight to the castle to prevent further casualties. Making the warrior think he's got the upper hand, the deal is now completed. Demon King must either destroy humanity or get them to surrender, but they won't fall as long as the warrior stands. They intend to eradicate humanity before he slays the Demon King, as per the orders of their new king from another world. The group happened upon a city in shambles after Dracus had passed through, getting attacked by demon soldiers. Making quick work of them, Kim picks up a map of the Demon Kingdom. All the roads lead to a single point on the map, which is also connected to all the battlefields. Edward points to a certain village in the mountains that is too suspicious, having no strategic value, having the road end there. Wondering whether that's the main base, they decide it's worth a visit in hopes of slowing down the invasion as well. After a week, they arrive at a demon city making weapons. The warrior doesn't want to hurt the civilians, but Edwards points out how everyone is involved in the war effort. While the two argue, Kim marches ahead to get started. Kim does most of the work while the other 3 remain mostly useless. Edward picks up a Mauser pistol, confirming the existence of the third. Edward states that they're going to draft civilians for the war since anyone can easily use a gun. He then rewards Kim with a map marked with the garrison locations, which he takes happily. Meanwhile, the warrior starts slamming away on the ground in frustration. At the demon port city of Stuckfit, a half-demon human boy named Maiden works as a dockhand to provide for himself and his sister, Myron. He aspires to one day become a general as a dragon flies overhead. Scientists speculated the existence of a second brain in large dinosaurs, which was exactly what Kim found around Dracus's waist. By turning his brain into another creature's, he can recreate their nervous system. He didn't do it thus far due to the risk of losing control, but he can now thanks to the second brain. The dragon overhead is revealed to be Kim, flying to his heart's content. Combining the best traits of the countless creatures devoured, he truly has become a monster. He lays waste to Stuckfit with flames, devouring everything in sight. Maiden runs to save Myron, but Kim destroys the house and kills her. Maiden makes a final futile attempt with a sword. Edward's goal was weakening the demon's military capabilities, but Kim got quite the buffet out of it. The four great kings discuss the destruction supposedly caused by a dragon. Sloth, a dragon herself, states that it's impossible due to the fact that this creature spewed fire more than 50 times within a day. This could only be done by her, the legendary dragon Road. They ponder the existence of another legendary dragon. If the great kings slay this dragon of Stuckfit, they would increase morale drastically. Thus, Sloth decides to go show this creature what a real dragon is like. Kim monologues about how beautiful Stuckfit was for him, having feasted on many hybrid species. He is now able to optimize his skills, coming even closer to becoming an apex predator. He continues to attack every demon settlement in sight. Sloth searches for the dragon. Unnerved by all the destruction it had caused within 1 hour, she finds him eating a dead demon and is dumbstruck by its hybrid appearance. She uses Dragon Speak, the ability to terrify and bend opponents to their will, and commands him to stop. Naturally, it has no effect on Kim, but he finally notices her. He tells her that her powers are futile against him before proceeding to scavenge some more. Irritated, she transforms into her dragon form, much larger in size compared to Kim's. Kim blocks her blows easily with his mystium-coated arms reinforced by over-muscles, leaving her arms throbbing with pain instead. Casually taking mental notes, he removes the mystium slime to experiment. Seeing this opening, Sloth grabs him by the head and arms and bites him on the neck. Kim kicks her away, swiftly regenerating his shoulder. Concluding his experiment, he spares her life in the name of her valuable contributions. Angered even more, Sloth prepares her condensed dragon breath in retaliation. Her channeling is interrupted when Kim lets out the command, eat. Sloth starts coughing out blood infested with parasites, which entered her body when she tore out some of his flesh. Sloth falls as parasites eat away at her from within. Kim is soon interrupted by telepathy magic calling for help. The warrior monologues about his journey thus far. He time traveled to the present from 10 years in the future, the time in which demons and humanity fought together against the monster of destruction. But he and all the demons end up devoured. After traveling back in time, he slew the slime whom he thought was the monster, thereby saving Kim in the Great Forest. As such, Edward was saved in this timeline, but now he does not know what the future holds. He has no regrets, with the sole exception of not getting enough information on the demon forces. This inadequacy plagued him greatly in his next encounter with the Great King. 30 minutes prior, the warrior, Sanctus, and Edward are heading to their next destination. They are greeted by Greed, one of the four kings, who welcomes them to his city, Grand Vetus. He proposes that they peacefully settle things via a game. Wanting to save as many lives as possible, the warrior accepts. Inside Greed's mansion, Edward goes up against Greed in a game of poker. If Edward wins, they get safe passage. If Greed wins, he will take his foe's soul. Edward loses and Greed casually harvests his soul into a casino chip. In his final moments, he uses telepathy to reach Kim. Greed's absolute execution skill ensures agreements made beforehand are carried out for certain. The Saintess attempts to punch him, but fails thanks to his complete zone of peace, a skill which negates violence in the area. Greed asks her if the prince was important to her, causing her to blush and challenges her, betting Edward's soul in exchange for her own. The Saintess, the ace of the convent, plays dice, but she too is defeated. The warrior panics, but the moment is saved by Kim, who crashes into the room. The warrior has never gambled before and cannot abandon his comrades either. Kim barges into the room using force while surrounding demons snicker about his impending demise. He is informed about the complete zone of peace, but grins in giddy anticipation. Greed challenges him to a game, and Kim straight up bets both his and the warrior's souls to win back the two lost. Kim is determined to win, but the warrior is skeptical. Kim challenges Greed to rock, paper, scissors, and immediately punches him with his fist as rock. Skills that are specifically targeted at him do not affect Kim. As such, the complete zone of peace targets him when he uses violence in the area, leaving him unaffected. Kim starts beating up the dumbstruck Greed, who understands that he was now defeated. As the conditions of the agreement were met, both Edward and the Saintess's souls were returned. Kim proceeds to challenge Greed for everything he has left in exchange for his life. He asks Greed which hand he'll use to hit him next, only to stomp him with his foot. The nearby demons attempt to flee as Greed is defeated, but Kim stops them in their tracks. The warrior protests, but Kim draws his sword to his neck and asks him if he's going to do what's good or what's right. Lost for words, the warrior takes Edward and the Saintess out while Kim deals with the remaining demons. Thus, he begins burning them all alive. The trapped demons shriek in despair while Kim monologues about his new skills. He obtained information and control of the casino itself, but unfortunately didn't have enough time to experiment. Filling the building with oxygen, he blows out a little fire to set the whole place ablaze. Meanwhile, the warrior is still internally conflicted by having to choose between justice and goodness. Back at the castle, only 2 great kings remain, and they are approached by a small-built demoness. This being, the Demon King, is more akin to a queen. She mourns the loss of both sloth and greed, but jealousy points out how they shouldn't let the mourning sit back the plan, making their comrade's sacrifices pointless. With the warrior delayed, their plan is in the final stage, but the queen is too tired right now. Lust and jealousy are determined to proceed with the plan, commenting how both of their names don't quite fit them. Their only goal is to buy more time, even if they die in the process. Jealousy volunteers to die first, stating that he's a mere old man wanting to go first. Back in Grand Vedas, Kim takes some damage from the casino fire. If his reintegrating areas get exposed to fire, he sustains critical damage. He notices an unscathed salamander crawling out of the debris, 10 feet tall and resistant to dragon fire, and proceeds to devour it. The party sets off with Edward complaining about a headache. Grinning, Kim tells him he had overcome fire thanks to the salamander. Edward has conflicted feelings over how his past murderer is continuously getting stronger. Seeing how this terror won't help their truce, Kim assures him that he is vicious but useful nonetheless. He tells Edward how he guilt-tripped the warrior into choosing goodness over justice. At this point, Edward only needs to satisfy one more condition to kill the warrior. The warrior is the most powerful being on the continent. He is protected from destiny, easily escapes death blows, and always gets help in life-threatening situations. Even against an unbeatable foe, chance intervenes to grant him victory. For him, miracles are guaranteed, and to kill him is to overthrow his destiny. Because of this, the warrior has always triumphed, so long as he remained a warrior. The party obtains a horse carriage, and Edward discusses how the warrior already lost his virtuousness and righteousness, leaving only the just aspect. Kim asks why he wants to kill his brother so much. Edward tells him how their father wanted his firstborn to be king and him to be the advisor. He made a plan to disqualify the warrior, but dropped the idea fearing the goddess's wrath. Edward found and adopted these plans with his own unique twist. He does so with the intention of making their father despair, not out of animosity towards his brother. At the Flatfield Plains, they catch sight of the demon castle. They find it odd that there are no barriers to entry, not to mention the whole area is barren and deserted. The horse suddenly shrieks and freezes in fear, prompting the warrior to state something feels off as well. The horse would no longer move, albeit being unharmed. They decide to spend the night there, but the horse makes a run for it the second it gets unleashed. Abruptly feeling something, the warrior states that they're already surrounded. Jealousy slowly approaches them, wondering how such an incompetent group made it thus far. An earthquake begins to reverberate as countless limbs reach out through the ground. Surrounded by an army of the undead, he introduces himself as Richmond, who had served the demon kingdom for 200 years. Having worked as the king's direct chancellor for half his life, he was the highest-ranking undead, a lich. He cannot die as long as the phylactery containing his soul and power remains intact. He died once at the hands of the previous warrior, and by the time he returned, his king was long slain. As a genius sorcerer, he learned that he was defeated by the warrior's light attribute magic. Thus, he set off to find some way to imbue light tolerance to both himself and his army. The party wonders why they couldn't detect them at all. The saintess used her holy magic on an undead only to heal it instead. Turns out Richmond himself is using holy magic via the temple's holy scripture. He and his army were faithful disciples of the temple for decades and had overcome their jealousy for the living. This makes the saintess, who only followed the temple for a decade, pale in comparison. Quoting holy verses, Richmond explains their devotion and powers after turning to pure light. The saintess, Angela, asks him to let them pass, but Richmond refuses to overrule the laws of Earth as he is a general of the Demon King. She puts up a holy barrier to stop the attacking undead, but they pass right through. Edward supports her, reminding her of how he protected her in the past and rekindling her feelings, finding her drive once more. Kim finally wakes up and plows through his foes using physical attacks. The party follows his lead, with the warrior using his holy sword to destroy them. Kim is determined to end things fast though, suddenly transforming into a complete dragon to incinerate the undead and take to the skies. With the party on his back and burning everything in the area mid-flight, Kim heads straight for the castle. The warrior notices Edward isn't panicked at all and asks him if Kim is a dragon. He denies it but refuses to reveal Kim's true identity as he's bound by oath. Edward states that Kim is unlike any other human and is dangerous enough to make the world his enemy. Convinced Kim is a shapeshifter. The warrior theorizes he is a doppelganger demon who turned on his own, or is a half-breed born from a human and demon. If this wasn't the case, he wonders if Kim is the monster of destruction, but denies it swiftly on account of Kim's contributions. The undead give chase, but the party arrives at the seemingly ordinary demon castle. They have 2 hours until the undead catch up, but the warrior realizes it's not enough time to slay the king and makes a request of Kim. Kim drops them off at the castle grounds and flies up again, taking out the foot soldiers with ease and buying time. He uses flammable fuel and his dragon fire to set things ablaze, leaving nobody to open the gates for the undead. Wondering if this was the dragon of Stuckfit, Richmond realizes his forces would only become firewood for the dragon within castle walls. Trusting Lust to protect the king, he prepares to take down Kim instead. Meanwhile, the party advances through the castle, but are stopped by Lust wielding a large concrete pillar. Lust, also known as Julius, is a powerful male demon with rippling muscles and is also an incubus. Incubi are mid-tier mage-type demons who seduce humans to steal their vitality, relying solely on magic to do so. As they are typically pretty boys and men, they don't develop much muscle. Now in possession of a hulking muscular body due to an incident 10 years ago, Lust uses brute force instead of magic against his foes. His flashback sequence is interrupted by the warrior, who charges straight at him. His brawny fist clashes with the holy sword, sending him flying into a wall. Thus was the abrupt end of the most powerful demon general, whose fate was inevitable. He did not take hostages, had the power of giant monsters, had advantage in his fights from a powerful army, so he was no match for the warrior in a one-on-one fair fight. Lust passes away, accepting his demise as the party advances into the throne room. Inside, the lone demon queen innocently calls out to Lust in response. Outside, Kim munches on something while overlooking the undead army. Jealousy is freaking out, wondering what Kim's doing and questioning his own decisions thus far. His cheeks bulging, Kim plunges down into the enemy horde. Jealousy uses fire resistance enhancements on his forces, but Kim just hurls out the flammable fuel on them instead. He then hurls out a little fire while Jealousy laughs, thinking the liquid is just poison. He is interrupted as his forces start exploding in every direction, with the power of around 30 fire breaths. As Richmond explodes, his phylactery shatters as well, finally killing him for good. As of now, no demon generals stand. Richmond and his undead army are utterly defeated. Kim wonders if he should eat the remaining corpses, but opts to go find leftovers in the castle instead. He enters the castle and eats all the fallen soldiers along the way, including Lust. He enters the throne room and is greeted by the sight of Edward and the warrior arguing, with the latter protecting the demon queen. Edward is furious, but the warrior insists that they must coexist instead. Kim demands an explanation, but the warrior thinks it's best to keep the truth from Kim for now. Edward informs him that the woman is the demon king and that his brother is abandoning his mission to slay her. The warrior asks Kim to listen, stating that the woman wasn't originally the demon king, but a soul from another world inhabiting the demon king's body. He used his lie detection skill to confirm her claims and fully believes her. Kim realizes she is the third person from Earth. While Eddie transmigrated or reincarnated as Edward, he was simply transported or transferred into this world in his own body. In the Demon King's case, his body was possessed by an Earth human. She used to be an ordinary office worker, preferring to read and collect military memorabilia on her own. She didn't take her Demon King position too seriously because it was a common trope in novels. Assuming she was in a dream, she casually implemented knowledge, systems, and concepts from Earth here, drastically overpowering the Demon Kingdom. Thinking of herself as a protagonist in a novel, she awaited the warrior's arrival. But now, her generals have all fallen for naught and she's finally awakened to the grim reality, begging for mercy. Kim breaks it down to her ordering her forces to wreak havoc and now surrendering out of fear. He asks the warrior if believes this nonsense, knowing full well it's all true. The warrior starts to cry, stating that too many lives were lost. In response, Kim and Edward approach him with grim expressions and Edward attacks his brother with his light sword. The warrior blocks it, but his holy sword shatters as the prince's blade pierces both him and the demon queen. A warrior must always be righteous, just, and good. However, Edward and Kim's ill wills have tampered with his qualities. By abandoning his quest, he lost his final quality of righteousness and is no longer a warrior. Edward points out this grim fact as he withdraws his sword. Horrified, Angela attempts to heal him, but Kim stops her, transforming into a snake and swallowing her whole. Days prior, Edward warns Kim about Angela's healing capabilities. Kim asks if Edward wasn't in love with her, which he accepts but is still unwilling to let her live. If his brother is no longer the warrior but alive, the throne goes to him. On the other hand, a priestess's healing power is a miracle which grants her immortality too. He instructs Kim to completely destroy her body by eating her, and Kim assures him that everything he eats doesn't go into his stomach, but somewhere else entirely. While he doesn't know where that place is, it's not physically connected to his body. In the present, Edward asks if Kim wants to eat the Demon King, but he declines. He brings up the matter of their wishes when a bright light shines and transports Kim into a separate space. Before him floats an ethereal cube with faces on each side, the goddess. It states that it is programmed to take on the form most ideal for its subject, but as Kim is outside the system's management bounds, it failed to do so. It formed and maintains this world via management of skills and status, creating monsters and supervising the reincarnation of souls. Kim asks why he was brought here. It explains that Earth is adjacent to this world and errors in the system caused these transfers. The monsters here were created after referencing beings from Earth as well. It's ready to grant Kim's wish and devoid of feelings, complementing the murder of the priestess and warrior. The warrior system was implemented to balance both societies via competition, but it led to a stagnation instead. Now the multiple races of mankind will battle for supremacy. All that sorted, Kim asks to be sent back to Earth. The goddess states that it cannot grant this wish as he is already having a huge impact on this world. He asks for a way to return on his own, but turns out Edward is already browsing said information. Kim cancels his request and inquires about creatures that transcend all. The goddess begins pumping loads of information into his brain, but these beings are still in development as they're beyond Elmwood's capabilities. It proposes to produce one now for Kim, but he decides to save his wish for later. In the meantime, he will consume all other existing creatures. He gets sent back alongside Edward, who was crying as the goddess had taken on Angela's form. Having gathered all the knowledge he needed amidst regret, he knows how to send Kim back as well. The Demon King's plan was actually large-scale reform. This in turn drastically improved the demon's combat power and endangered humanity. The capital fortress is under siege by a demon army, but is miraculously saved by Edward atop Kim in full dragon form. The king holds his head as his soldier reports on Edward's accomplishments. While his subjects are sweet-struck, the king is dumbstruck about his son controlling Dragon 2. He realizes he cannot deny Edward's feats anymore, but he knows he's just as cruel as himself. He concludes that Edward killed the warrior and priestess too, as his plans for returning his eldest son into a prince have disappeared as well. Most of all, he is plagued by the question of why Edward was not punished by the goddess. Now the priests are also supporting Edward, leaving him no choice but to accept him. Edward flew around Grand Canteen and slew all the demon forces. He then returns to Santo Olmaruz amidst unending cheers for a royal audience. After a brief chat, he parts ways with Kim and bids him good luck. Edward enters the throne room in his full glory, but the king still has his doubts. He places his sword in a knight's care and kneels before the king. He states that he learned the weight of the crown from his journey and slowly stands, light condensing in his hands as his sword returns to him. Thus, he boldly states that he's succeeding the throne now. Knights surround Edward, but he casually cuts them all down. The king predicted this and signals for his hidden assassins to take action, but nothing happens. He notices all his subjects are in a trance, affected by Kim's improved parasitic skills. While he cannot control his victims, Kim can manipulate their emotions and memories. By infecting the water supply, he brainwashed everything to empathize with Edward. Finally confronting his father for all the evil he's done, Edward stabs and kills him. He puts on the royal robe and crown as Kim breaks through the roof, killing an assassin. Edward officially becomes king amidst much applause, but he is haunted by his brother's ghost that night. Edward wished for knowledge in the purest form, where he learned his brother's last words as well: "Don't cross the line." He states that it's too late since he already conspired with Kim and destroys the ghost. In order to send Kim back to Earth, he must offer the heads of the elf, dwarf, hybrid, and lizardman kings at a shrine sealed within the temple's dungeons. And this would, without doubt, bring forth an age of war and chaos. Kim concludes writing part 1 of a book titled Fantasy World Food Travels. When he returns to Earth and kills his enemies, he's going to live under a different name and publish this book. Edward suggests changing the title to The More I Eat, the Stronger I Get, but Kim says it doesn't matter. He'd assured it'll be a bestseller with 3 blockbuster films. They discuss the return ritual, but Edward claims it's impossible at the moment. If they do this, the king's heirs will claim the thrones, ally together, and come after humans for revenge. Elves are skilled archers and magic users, the dwarves are unparalleled blacksmiths, and both the hybrids and lizardmen have superior physical abilities. As of now, humanity has no hope of winning. Edward is determined to establish power from within first to build up their strength. He hands Kim a hit list combined with a map to all sorts of mystical creatures, and appoints him as the top secret royal investigator, allowing him to travel freely. Edward asks him to return within a year for his coronation ceremony, though. Edward talks to the head assassinator, who is now tasked with his safety. The royal assassins are now under Edward's control as he possesses the signet ring. The royal guard, under the parasite's effects, need to be fully turned to his side as Kim is leaving, though. Meanwhile, Kim puts on the simpler enchanted armor, perfect for posing as a mercenary and adventurer, and sets off. Back on Earth, Kim was nothing more than a notorious criminal. He didn't have many hobbies because of his secret, but he truly loved reading. He enjoyed fiction the most, but this world was too far behind the times for quality books. Even so, there were entertaining stories and songs to be heard containing boundless information preserved through generations via bards. Felina Greensmith is an aspiring bard turned wandering minstrel, irritated about how people only want to hear about exaggerated and exciting adventures. She enters a tavern in Sando Fabro and notices 3 mercenaries, Kim and a mystery person inside. Aiming for tips, she starts singing a glorified song about the prince and his knight. The audience loves it and the tips start flowing in, but she is already sick of the song. She sings of Edward's sorrow over his brother's death and how he was empowered by the goddess, causing Kim to laugh. An irritated mercenary attacks him, breaking Felina's flow. Kim effortlessly beats all his attackers while Felina makes a run for it. Meanwhile, Kim's onslaught is interrupted by the mystery person, Paladin Purecreed, who tells him to stop tormenting the weak. Kim notices the insignia of the city of the goddess on Purecreed. Paladins are mass-produced superhumans with asymmetric powers centered in the city of the goddess, while the Saintess was the pinnacle of their powers, creating one required too much time and resources. In contrast, Paladins are easier to make despite being inferior to a Saintess. Choosing not to get on the city's bad side, Kim lets go of the mercenary and talks to her. Purecreed is surprised he listens so easily, but Kim explains he was just responding to a threat. Embarrassed, she opts to drink another beer, while Kim leaves. Fambro was a country of little to no value, so it didn't suffer much from the Demon War. After the war, refugees and mercenaries flocked to the country, leading the economy to skyrocket. This was the start of the class system: the lower class of refugees, middle class of original residents, and upper class of mercenaries who rule everything. Money and violence became the currency, while Count Fabro only cared about himself. Kim meets up with a royal assassin, deciding to go ahead with their plan. Suddenly, the town goes into uproar as the Crimson Gale mercenary leader charges about looking for Kim for assaulting his men. The leader is desperate to appear strong to his men and increase their morale, so he brought numbers with him. A drunkard approaches and yells at them, so they prepare to beat him up to set an example. But an arrow out of nowhere kills the drunkard, causing all the citizens to riot and confront the mercenaries. The drunkard was none other than a disguised Kim taking the planned shot. Turns out Count Fabro was on Kim's hit list. The country was well renowned up until his grandfather's resignation, but the Count has the brain of a 12-year-old and the country is nothing now. It was mostly slums wide open to monsters, making it perfect hunting grounds for Kim. He enjoyed his time there doing idle slaughter, testing his abilities for 2 weeks. Edward plans on removing all the lords he deems unfit, so Kim starts a citywide riot by staging the attack and using multiple different voices, including dragon speak. This spurs the citizens into action, leading them to attack the mercenaries while Kim watches overhead. The rampage of San of Fabro started out of the citizens' anger, who chase out both mercenaries and refugees. The Count was also killed, a perfect finish. Edward pretends to be angered by the news and adds a clause to the territory management law. Any lord can be stripped of their territory if the Pope and King deems him unfit. He also limits the number of mercenaries who can stay within a certain territory. Kim watches the city burn as the royal assassin reports to him. His next destination is Kavalov's, a territory with griffin sightings. As Kim prepares to leave, he's approached by Paladin Purecreed. Griffins are high-level monsters whose front half is eagle and hind half is lion. They are a perfect example of this world's magnificence and imperfection in one, a truly inefficient body. They fly awkwardly and hop around on the ground, are still pretty strong, live in groups of 10 and prey on horses, so attacks on humans are common. Kavalov's is the Rocky Mountains of the Griffins, so the guild has requested the extermination of the Griffins. As such, Kim and Purecreed, who is now calling him Master, plan to hunt down the head Griffin and curb their hunting activities. She sings him words of noble praise, but they're honestly wasted on Kim. When the royal assassin assassinated Count Fabro in his own mansion during a chaos and was returning to Kim, Purecreed happened to be nearby and followed him out of suspicion. She overhears the assassin calling him Sir Kim and realizes his true identity. She confronts him with stars in her eyes, so he shows her the royal medallion and asks her to keep quiet about it. She agrees on the condition that he takes her as his disciple. Paladins are tracked 24/7 by magic to reduce the wastage of military strength, and if one is killed, the tracking spell transfers to the attacker and makes him a wanted man. Thus, Kim attempts to make her leave of her own volition by making her do grueling tasks, but to no avail. She digs a cave with her bare hands while making no sound, all with a smile on her face. Hidden in the cave on the mountains, Kid Duo wait in ambush for the Griffins. While Kim is mildly impressed by her abilities, the Griffins return and he instructs her to handle it however she sees fit. She bravely charges with her sword and attacks the nearest Griffin, who grabs her by the head. She returns triumphant after some time later, but Kim states that her skills are terrible. Purecreed loosens her sword grip, fearing it would break, making weak swings. She constantly checks her sword, slowing her judgment, and since her attention is elsewhere, her magic is slow and inaccurate. These were all criticisms she has received before, but hearing it from Kim hurt her more. He tells her to cast aside her sword, leading her to wonder if she is unfit to be a knight, but he states she can fight like him instead. While she wonders if he meant fighting with her bare hands, Kim heads towards another pack of griffins and casually grabs one by the throat. Kim one-shots the griffin, while Purecreed watches dumbstruck. Purecreed's swordsmanship is average, firepower and technique of the light sword are lacking, and physical powers remain untapped. She hasn't built upon any of her skills and capabilities, making her weak. Even so, she is invincible against humans, just not monsters or demons. Kim reluctantly took her as his apprentice, but seeing her fight made him interested in teaching her. Why? Because Lionhands Purecreed is the same type of monster as he. A dozen griffins surround them as Kim takes out a magic pouch, used to stash and remove possessions, and pulls out some horse meat to draw his prey in. Thus, all the griffins charge at him in a frenzy. Shang Xing Quan is a Chinese martial arts technique that imitates the movements of animals. Kim learned it in China thinking it'll go well with his ability, but quit pretty early because it demanded the use of his human body. Using sheer power, devoid of technique, is just how he rolls. Using mild body modifications, he experiments with the griffins. He tests out a synthetic part arthropod creature he ate in Stuckfit, allowing the use of the front claw of the mantis shrimp, capable of punching with a force 2,500 times its body weight. Kim massacres the griffins with different monster and animal combinations as Purecreed watches. This battle was purely brutal and barbaric, lacking in any technique, flair, or knowledge. Such crude violence is not the way of the paladins, but she feels her heart racing from the prospect. She wonders if all her years of training were a waste, considering her own monstrous brute strength. But as a paladin, she cannot give in to her impulses. Kim returns and asks what she thinks. When she hesitates, he states that she doesn't have to answer immediately. Within 3 days, the duo kill all the griffins and head back. At the Kavalov's Adventurers Guild, Kim is posing as Jack, a rank C adventurer. The receptionist blandly tells him that they have orders to give the credit for the extermination to another party. Kim asks the receptionist the reason for her claim, but she plainly states that it's an order and cannot reveal who it came from. Kim concludes that someone at the guild is stealing others' work and that the receptionist is their accomplice. He wonders what'll happen if rumors spread to other regions, but she threatens him, claiming that he's nothing compared to the guild master. Kim grabs her hand and states that he'll come to him, crushing her wrists soon afterwards. The guildmaster, Giulio Aventuras, is the only adventurer to reach the rank SS. 25 years prior, he was a member of the warrior party that defeated the Demon King. He wished for the power to defeat enemies he couldn't best before and gain immense influence upon return. An adventurer symbolizes freedom, and the power he was granted was political power. Using the guild, he spread the narrative of suppressing freedom to control others. But this time, the warriors' party lacked an adventurer purposefully removed by the king to prevent Giulio's influence. Thus, the people praise the symbol of the crown now. To restore power to the symbol of freedom, he needs a hero amongst adventurers, preferably his son George. George opposes the idea of taking someone else's credit, though, but his father berates him that it's necessary. Their conversation is abruptly interrupted by the receptionist's screams, prompting them to head downstairs. They are greeted by Kim mopping the floor with everyone there. Enraged by what was done to the receptionist, his fiancé, George attacks Kim with his sword. Kim nonchalantly shatters the blade, grabs him by the neck, and kills him. He introduces himself to an enraged Giulio, who apologizes for trying to steal his credit. Kim accepts the apology and turns to leave, angering him further. Kim plainly states that he was defending himself and that he only attacked because Giulio tried to steal from him without permission. Giulio contemplates how selfish he had been and how his methods were never right. But none of that mattered now, as he was just robbed of his family and future. He calls for the Kingbird Feathers, Three Swords, Youths of Redevil, and Cyclone Axe guilds to enact his revenge. The history of Lionhands Purecreed goes a long way since she was made a paladin before she joined the training to serve the purpose of the goddess. Even though she had inhuman physical capabilities, she lacked control over her abilities. But when Kim came into her life, he was the one who was able to teach her the basics, but she was still conflicted. Suddenly, people of the Cavalov's guild start gathering in front of the place where Kim and his right hand, Lionhands Purecreed, were staying to get their revenge on him. While Kim was returning from his travel, Giulio Aventuras, the guild master of Cavalov's guild, stands before him with the desire of taking revenge for his son's murder in his eyes. Kim takes the situation very casually, as he has experienced the same thing over and over as he took the life of many people's loved ones. The mere existence of Kim was overflowing the rage through his veins, and he ends up taking the chance to attack with the aura he sharpened for decades, but it wasn't enough to cut through the evil tactics of Kim. Meanwhile, Kim's right hand finished taking apart the limbs of the guild adventurers as they ran away in fear of seeing the monster-like woman in front of them. Tearing up Lionhands, Purecreed sits beside her master and reveals the story about the dark reality of the goddess and her granting people supernatural strength. Kim knew that fact was no secret, as all of the higher-ups were well known about it, and Prince Edward was the one who told him that. When Lionhands Purecreed starts talking about the Saintess creating experiments while showing her modified body skills just like Kim has, Kim finally understood why he was able to sense the similarities between him and her, as she was the same type of monster, just like him. Kim then sends her off to arrange the tickets for a carriage, as they made quite a mess in one place, and meanwhile, he receives his payment from the royal assassin for obtaining the information for the prince. He was also given a new identity as a mercenary for his new destination, Santo Carnargo, where he first met Prince Edward. Somehow in the travel to Carnargo, Kim and his right hand ended up in the same carriage with the aspiring bard named Felina Greensmith, who was truly nervous witnessing them traveling with her. Felina recognized the both of them as she had seen Kim wrecking up the bar she was in and witnessed the wrath of Lionhands Purecreed on the Cavalov's guild with her own eyes. It was a pure coincidence to meet up with the same duo, who were the main reason why she canceled her plans and fled the city. When she was thinking of finding another carriage, the moment she was going to arrive in the city, the carriage enters an unknown dungeon. Meanwhile, Baron Carnargo gets the news of a kilometer-wide area south of the basin, which has eroded into a full-blown dungeon. The news of another dungeon was making him shiver in anger, as the adventurers were only making a profit on the dungeons and making a mess rather than paying taxes. He actually hated the main culprit, Giulio Aventuras, for it, as he was the one who founded the guild and passed the law. Also, his request to have the dungeon destroyed wasn't responded to by anybody, since everyone was only focusing on making easy money. But the good news ends up arriving with the emblem of the dead Giulio in the hands of Kim and his partner. Baron then fills them both with all the information about the dungeons, as there was a continuous conflict between the lords and the adventurers for the active dungeons in Carnargo City. By accepting the request of Baron Carnargo, Kim approaches the entrance of the city dungeon but gets rejected to enter by the guild administrators upon introducing himself as a mercenary. Kim ends up obliterating the adventurers as his right hand follows him into the cave with the Baron's information. When they both change their eyes using mana to see deeper, they get attacked by some monsters on the mission of eradicating the dungeon, which was the Baron's request. Baron's main concern was to eradicate the dungeon from the city, as the dungeon getting bigger only will contaminate the water supply, which will endanger the citizens. The mission was useful for Kim as well, since he will be able to feast on the creatures and materials in the dungeon. Kim noticed that even though his disciple can change her body like him, but not in the same process, as there may be some kind of surgical transplant involved in the case. The sinister moves and modified body of Lionhands Purecreed finish off all the monsters guarding the entrance. Lionhands Purecreed revealed that there might not be someone like her, since most of her paladin sisters lost their arms and legs in the process of experimentation. Also, there was something about the mimics that caught Kim's attention. Something strange happened when Kim tried feeding on the flesh of dead monsters, which made him realize that the monsters aren't alive but biological weapons powered by the dungeon magic. The same feeling that he had when he tried devouring the Saintess, as magic was flowing through her veins instead of blood, but he was able to adjust to it in the end. His body was sickening on the inside for the deadly creatures, and he wanted to put an end to the dungeon quickly so they could move on to a place that has suitable food to eat. The book of Giulio Aventuras called the dungeons to be an abundance of magical power, with riches hidden all over, which makes Kim wish to beat the man to death once again. Since that wasn't possible anymore, he took out his anger on the monsters and undead humans in the dungeon. Even though dungeons might look like a cave to a normal person, it is like a living creature that Kim can use to search for the most vital parts. Kim revealed to Lionhands Purecreed information about a demon general whose flesh and blood gave him wayfinding abilities. Now the general resides within him forever as a friend, hypothetically speaking. After opening the 150-year-old door, Kim and Lionhands Purecreed came face to face with a creature that looked like a wyvern or dragon and was full of mixed body parts. Looking at the creature alone was making Kim sick, since it felt like he was looking at himself, which made him disgusted. To declare war against the dungeon boss, Kim transformed himself into the best modified beast with the body parts that he acquired from various monsters throughout the world. Meanwhile, the Adventurer Guild identity checker was contemplating his life choices after feeling the earthquake made by Kim and his opponent. The weak slam made by the dungeon boss angered Kim as he scrunched his hands with his dragon claws while dodging the tail attacks. Even after being tied to the neck, Kim kept on dodging its foul attack to put fatal bite fangs on his skull. When Kim shoved the dungeon boss with his fully powered transformed hands, it ended up splatting blood all over his face, which was mixed with fatal bite venom. The boss had the plan of getting the venom under Kim's skin, which led him to finish it off with his claws by ripping its throat apart. The death of the creature flashes in its eyes as it smiles after seeing Kim before embracing the peace of death. Kim noticed the smile on the creature's face, but decides not to think much of it as they had to move on to look for the dungeon core. Everything that was mentioned by Giulio Aventuras about the dungeon core was unclear at first, but Kim knew how the pheromones worked for the other creatures. After listening to cringeworthy quotes from Lionhands Purecreed, Kim proceeds to cut up the dungeon core into bite-sized pieces to devour them, which could gain him the ability to turn dirt into hard shells and to combine pheromones. Well, they both came outside the dungeon after finishing it in mere 3 hours. Kim was arrested and handcuffed as he was taken inside the carriage of the official guards, which sparked the same memory from years ago, when he was arrested for the first time. The next scene moves to a ship in a quiet sea where Felina Greensmith was playing her lute in tranquility. But all of a sudden, an attack was made by the river pirates, and surprisingly, Kim and his right hand were traveling in the same ship. When the leader of the pirates proposed Kim to join his crew, Kim ends up engulfing flame on the man with a newly gained skill that was gained from the dungeon core. By combining dinosaur lungs, lizardman sweat glands, and giant dinosaur breast veins together, now he can spray fire from his hands. Also, he wasn't arrested after escaping the dungeon, as the guards that came for him was Baron's men, which was purely an act to deceive the Adventurers Guild. When the pirate leader was turned into charcoal by Kim, Lionhands Purecreed kept on chopping up all the pirate soldiers that came attacking her master and herself. She noticed an unfamiliar sensation after holding her sword, which she didn't understand why. Kim used poison to cover the enemy ship and used fog on the one they were on to lure and kill every pirate that was left. Suddenly, a surprise attack from a giant pirate was about to reach him, but Kim instantly dodged the attack and smashed the guy with his monstrous hand after flying midair by shooting fire with his legs. Meanwhile, Felina Greensmith was shocked to encounter the same dude doing the evilest things once again. The sailors on the ship appreciated the help of 2 warriors as they protected them from the grasp of invaders. When Lionhands Purecreed expressed the new changes in her sword-holding skills, Kim explained that she must have adjusted to controlling her body by increasing her skills. The characteristics of Lionhands Purecreed made Kim feel like she will just be like him when she reaches maturity if she keeps on losing her humanity. After reaching the largest trade and fishing port of Grand Cantine, Genial Desierto, they realized that is a city filled with marine mammal hybrids. After reaching the lodging, Kim was given a new identity of a knight to proceed with his journey in the new place. The main reason why Kim and Lionhands Purecreed traveled to Genial Desierto was the Kraken, which ended up troubling the port's functionalities. Kim also wanted to improve his skills by devouring the Kraken, but one thing that was quite noticeable was that the city celebrated the Kraken's existence. Kim was rather disappointed by the information gained from the restaurant, as the Kraken was only a tourist trap with a small figure compared to the size he imagined at first. When Kim was thinking that his coming all this way was useless, a lion figure hybrid man from the Adventurers Guild reached the island roaring for answers. The lion hybrid came asking a question to the whale hybrid leader, who had the authority of the little Kraken and his men. When the lion hybrid leader was furious to get no as an answer, he decided to use force and threats on the man to reach his goal. The situation instantly changes as the whale hybrid's men trap the members in charge of the lion hybrid's ship with the promise of breaking it apart. The enraged lion hybrid gets back on his ship, cursing the water hybrids, and leaves the place. Seeing the interesting sight, Kim ended up following the whale hybrid to his office with the desire of asking him what the lion hybrid and his men were talking about. The whale hybrid reveals that they were actually after the baby Kraken with the intention of killing it. But he was never going to allow that, since when the demon army came with a Kraken, there was only one living creature that had already hatched from hundreds of eggs, which was his cutie. Cutie considered him as the parent from the beginning, and since the land hybrids had a grudge from the past that goes back 50 years when Genial Desierto became the greatest trade port. 50 years ago, the lion hybrid leader got embarrassed by the whale hybrid leader, and that was the reason why he keeps on sending his son to continue his dirty work. When Kim left the office of Whale Hybrid, he seemed rather disturbed and scared by the true identity of how a real monster can be. He was so scared that he wanted his men to finish off someone if they put a hit on Kim's head. On the other hand, when Lionhands Purecreed was sick of the food of the new place, she meets a cat hybrid Saintess, who claimed that the demons have hidden a dreadful weapon in the city. The Saintess took Lionhands Purecreed to the same restaurant where Kim was and explains that the demonic kraken still remains in the city. Knowing that the temple was ignoring her pleading, she didn't understand what was happening. Lionhands Purecreed ends up making the Saintess unconscious by hitting her head and leaves the restaurant without even filling out the customer service survey. It seems that the whale hybrid named Orca Defishil made a request to Kim knowing that he was a knight and already made the payment for the work. Kim instantly transforms himself into a hybrid version of the cheetah and jumps into the locality of Santo and Camarina unnoticed by the guards. Actually, Orca Defishil wanted him to use some forged documents to accuse the guild master of being a spy of the hybrid allied nation, which will be able to cripple the guild for real. Kim wanted to do the job for him, but he wanted to do it in his own way. With sheer determination in mind, Kim reached the guild's branch and assassinated the lion hybrid and his secretary in one take in his beast form as he fled the place by setting up a fire. When the fire was extinguished by the guild members, Kim came into the scene with his mid-tier knight identity. It seems that Kim intentionally placed a voice recorder crystal after eating up the dead's vocal cords as he recreated them. Not only that, but also placed the forged documents under the carpet by applying salamander mucus to protect them. All of Kim's plans worked correctly, which ended up getting him successful with his whole plan as he agreed to Orca Defishil. Finally, the suspicion of tax evasion and fabricating a motive for murder came under the lion hybrid's son's name, washing up all the sins of the father. Meanwhile, the cat hybrid Saintess was kidnapped and tied into a bloody bathtub along with a bucket filled with ice cubes by the right hand of Kim, Lionhands Purecreed. When the cat Saintess regains consciousness, she finds Lionhands Purecreed wearing gloves as she begins to heat up the torture equipment to begin the treatment for lying to her. After researching the incident in the temple, Lionhands Purecreed found that no missionary had visited them for the matter of Kraken, and she found that she was carrying an adventurer license with her. Even though Lionhands Purecreed didn't know what she was chasing, she decided that the person who impersonated the followers of the goddess should be punished. Meanwhile, Matteo Frenza, the senior staff reporter at Anco Marina Daily Elmwood, was able to find some crucial details and evidence in the investigation of the guild master's death and believed that the real culprit must be someone else. His investigation led to his death as the royal assassin got hold of the information and he informed the matter to Kim while asking for his opinion on the matter of Julio Aventuras. Kim acted indifferent to the matter of Julio Aventuras and the royal assassin left the place, which concluded business of Kim in that place. On the other hand, he was rather distressed by the fact that some creatures had compatibility with others, and to have a deeper understanding of the matter, he realized that he had to keep on eating and experimenting. When Kim reached the lodging where he and Lionhands Purecreed were staying, he was astonished to see the deteriorating mental condition of his so-called right hand as she tortured the adventurer to find out the real information about her activities. Lionhands Purecreed's mere stupidity made them both go on the run in the no man's forest, as they now have to wait until the situation cools down since kidnappings and torturing someone can raise a heavy alert in the public. While Kim was showing down on the sea serpent that he received from Orca Defishil, the royal assassin arrives at their location with the surprising news of an elf entering the woods. Elves are considered to be some kind of infamous race in the Elmwood continent for their long lifespans and innate magical abilities that make their arrogance and confidence higher than the others. But the royal assassin was concerned by the fact that the elf that came into the woods isn't a normal one, but a candidate to be the next heir of the elven kingdom, which makes the person a prince or princess. Kim thinks about the rule of offering heads of kings from 4 different races, as the particular elf's head might be of help in the future to open a gateway to another world. The royal assassin was right about the mighty elf coming into the woods, as he could guess that the main reason was the Hydra. The Chamberlain of Elf Prince Lucian didn't want him to go face to face with the Hydra, since even the adventured guild of Julio Aventuras was unable to defeat it. But Prince Lucian wasn't ready to give up, since he has nothing to offer to the elven kingdom if he wanted to be the king. He ends up imprisoning his Chamberlain by the branches and vines with his elven magic, so he couldn't follow him anymore. While going through the water, Kim noticed that the plants that are supposed to attack something living going through weren't ceasing their movements. After using his ability on the plants, he found out that there was an intruder with magic on the other side, and someone trapped at the same time. Kim became sure that it was Prince Lucian from the Elphilis Kingdom, so he started thinking about how to approach him while Lionhands Purecreed was busy writing his biography. Lucian was in a great crisis, worrying about being worthy, since even though he was born the noblest with water attribute magic, he fell short due to the achievements of his twin siblings. When everyone else left his side, only his Chamberlain stayed with him, and his missing spot was making him heartache. When the time was passing, Lucian was at his mana limit for maintaining the water magic as the plants began to wrap around him to put an end to his breathing. Just when Lucian was thinking of embracing his death, a huge monstrous figure came flying down with the motive of helping him. Back in the capital, Prince Edward was proceeding with his plan to handicap the Adventurers Guild, but he worried that there must be consequences for his actions in the future. The royal assassin brought tea along with the news of Kim successfully making contact with Prince Lucian while wearing the kingdom's knight armor. It seems that he never believed that Lucian may ever be the king even if he defeated a dragon, but he wanted to help him to save his own skin. Meanwhile, Kim introduced himself to Prince Lucian after rescuing him from the venom-addicted plants, just like he planned with the royal assassin. Kim questioned the gratitude of Prince Lucian when he thanked him, since that was so unlike the elven race. He admits the arrogance of his race, knowing that it was the truth, and kept his reason for being thankful hidden from Kim. Suddenly, when Lionhands Purecreed came rushing into the scene, Kim ends up trapping her with the branches and vines as if she was only going to hamper his plans. When Prince Lucian finishes his introduction to Lionhands Purecreed, as he expresses his gratitude by bowing down to them, he ends up asking for their help to defeat the Hydra. Kim expresses the same desire to Lucian, and when they finish forming the team for attacking the Hydra, Lionhands Purecreed gets the duty of taking care of the spawns. After reaching the lake where the Hydra was residing, Prince Lucian instantly worked his magic to turn the fresh water into salt water, which brought the Hydra to the surface. Where the Hydra screeches for its enemies, it brought out wild animals in the forest on the flank, which was the main focus of Lionhands Purecreed. When she was busy shouting for her master's permission, he already turned into a modified sea serpent to keep on taking down the Hydra's heads. Prince Lucian noticed Kim having the same abilities as his shapeshifter as he kept on chowing down on the Hydra in his modified serpent form, but it turned out to be useless. When one head is cut off, two more take place with fast and limitless regenerative abilities. But Kim noticed that the body mass kept on decreasing by growing new heads, so he kept on testing the limit with his mantis claws. As countless heads kept on growing from the wounded spot, Kim splattered them on the water's surface with each move of his claws to see how long the Hydra could hold up. Eventually, the Hydra stopped regenerating after its 42nd head, and Lucian left the place, promising to repay his kindness as he carried the heads with him. Witnessing the noblest elf in her whole life, Lionhands Purecreed wished that Lucan could become the king for his friendly behavior with the others. But Kim makes it clear that Lucian isn't going to be the king as Prince Edward himself predicted. Meanwhile, in the Elven Kingdom Elphilis, when the public was celebrating the prince's return as he killed the Hydra, Lucian witnesses his brother lifting down the dead dragon's body, which ends up proving his actions futile. When Mission Hydra came to an end, Kim was thinking of invading the bandit camp in Marcus Boscoverd's territory while munching down on the body parts of his hunted creature. When the fight with the creature ended, Kim realized that Hydra didn't even have any heads at all, while its brain was situated in its torso, as the heads were connected to each other like a human arm. But Kim wasn't concerned about researching Hydra in general. He got himself busy with attacking the bandit camp with his newly gained abilities that let him split dragon fire into 3 parts. The sight of Kim was so frightening that the bandits thought he must be the wrath of the goddess herself while fleeing to the second camp. But after reaching the second camp, they found a hole in the wall with Lionhands Purecreed inside, executing the human lives in there after transformation. One of the bandits betrayed his friend to save himself from the frightening transformed woman that met his death as Kim stood before him. Kim could notice that Lionhands Purecreed was purely facing an identity crisis, as she couldn't even guess what she actually was. He knew that she was going through a transition period that will decide what she will be in the future. It seems that Kim's main plan wasn't to kill the bandits, but to bring out the Manticore by reducing his food and prey. When Kim and Lionhands Purecreed was discussing the sightings of the Manticore, it was already there listening to their conversation and demanding they stop their heretics. As per the book of Julio Aventuras said, a Manticore is so scary that it is better to flee rather than try to fight it, since it is the only hope for survival. The goddess created the Manticore, referring to dragons and hydras, and it had modified body parts full of a human head, the body of a lion, and the tail of a scorpion as they fed upon human meat. Surprisingly, Lionhands Purecreed and Kim felt no hostility towards the Manticore, even though he was planning to feed upon it almost instantly. The feeling between all of them was mutual, with a sense of bonding, and the Manticore wanted them to finish their business to come to him later. When Kim and Lionhands Purecreed finally finished destroying 72 bandit camps, they headed to Boscoverd Territory's 6th bandit camp, where they were supposed to meet the Manticore. The Paladin and Kim both were astonished to see the face of the Manticore, as it looked like it was an accurate copy of Kim himself. Kim took a seat as the Manticore requested and started listening to the explanation of his existence. He revealed that the goddess existed before the current world, and she took reference from earth creatures to creatures here. While creating various types of creatures, he also created a duplicate version of Kim, who is the same Manticore that was standing in front of him, making him the pet shop duplicate V0 3.0 bits. But the goddess was unable to replicate his core ability, which was consuming and absorbing the prey's abilities. The conversation led to Kim revealing that he had a son back on Earth who didn't get his abilities. The Manticore standing before him was more than 1,000 years old, and he is the only living from the first-generation creations. When the duplicate informed Kim about the winged creature with mixed bodily parts getting into a dungeon, he finally understood why he had that feeling of disgust after devouring the beast in the dungeon. However, the whole environment of friendliness changed in an instant when Kim questioned his duplicate about feeding upon his own kind. Kim made the right guess in blaming the Manticore, since it seemed odd for him to live this long just by devouring ordinary meals, because it wouldn't let him overcome the limits of his abilities. The fight breaks between the two pet shops as they both intend to feed on each other with the wish to become complete. They both set out on each other after completing their transformation, as they were rushing to maintain their insatiable appetite while they continued to drool. In a rushed move, they both chowed down on each other's flesh, and it helped the duplicate to overcome his limits once again. Meanwhile, Lionhands Purecreed didn't understand why they both were fighting, even if they were the same species, and moreover, it was for a meal. She didn't know what to make of it after hearing that her master is not a human from their world and doesn't know what to report back at the temple. She kept on looking at the barbaric and savage fight while she wished to reach the ultimate peak one day. But she had one more duty left to do as a paladin, since she was no longer a human being but a devout follower of the goddess. On the other hand, the Manticora was growing better each second after feeding on Kim's flesh over and over again. The abilities of Kim kept on reflecting from the Manticore as it continued to evolve rapidly, and his ability wasn't doing any damage to his duplicate. He finally realized he had to finish it the old-fashioned way. Kim began by slashing off the annoying tail of the duplicate, but it wasn't enough, as the duplicate began stabbing him with his own tail, as he now had the ability to utilize the separated body parts from his body. Kim knew that he wasn't going to win using his abilities, so he started chowing down on the separated tail. The arrogant and egoistic duplicate swung his claws to hit Kim, but ends up being grabbed by the neck. However, he was able to get away as his separated tail regenerated and hit Kim, which ended up with both engulfing each other with their flames. The duplicate was realizing the level of power the original has in his grasp every moment, but he wasn't ready to go down. The power that the duplicate was utilizing grew far worse and ended up with Kim in a really bad position. But when he was about to put the nail in Kim's coffin, the venom started to take an effect on his body as Kim injected the pufferfish venom from Earth to take him down. Finally, Kim had the upper hand, so he kept on tearing his opponent down on the ground, but the final words that he left for Kim weren't actually blissful. The duplicate claimed that he ran into another duplicate 50 years ago, which was V0 0.7 bits final, and it was getting closer to 1.0, so it will soon arrive. But Kim didn't think of the situation much and kept on munching the dead duplicate. Suddenly, he felt the silence in the air as Lionhands Purecreed was nowhere to be found, and she left a letter for him. At that moment, the royal assassin came running to give him the news that the adventurers have started a rebellion. After the fight with the duplicate, Kim was kind of concerned about every aspect, since he wasn't on the same level as him with the vast stores of knowledge, but he was able to secure the personality-changing ability. There was another thing that made him anxious, which was the letter left by the paladin. When it came to the matter of the adventurers starting a rebellion, the prince didn't want Kim to burn them down, but wished that the adventurers would kill some of the higher-ups that he doesn't like. So when they get painted as villains, Edward can save the day and be the hero. Edward claimed that Kim's newly gained abilities might help them in the matter. Meanwhile, the Adventurers Guild Santo Darmarga branch was going insane for the budget-cutting order that came from Prince Edward. They were planning to kidnap the royals to demand money from the prince. In that branch, there was a half-demon named Maiden who came from the port city of Stuckfit. When his whole family was destroyed by the dragon of Stuckfit, he wanted to get his revenge, but was blazed and turned to a crisp. But the anger of losing his loved ones brought out his hidden potential with explosive power as he awakened as a shapeshifter. He used a troll laborer's regenerative ability to grow his physical strength, but since trolls were weak to fire, he never healed properly. When he heard that Prince Edward returned to the kingdom on a red dragon, he was looking for ways to eradicate it from the world. When Santo Almaru's backup Mr. Vermico, a dragon-kind lizardman, looking like a red dragon, arrived, Maiden turned insane as he targeted him to finish him off. But fortunately, Maiden instantly got unconscious after getting knocked out by Vermico, and he was given punishment by the guild master for lack of cooperation. It seems that Vermico knew about Maiden as he heard about him back in his branch for being capable in the field. Maiden ignored whatever Vermico was saying and instantly rushed out, claiming that he wanted to test out his team members' skills as he was a dragon-kind. Maiden took Vermico out in the wild to fight against a marble basilisk, some kind of lizard man but of another species, to stir up a conflict. But Vermico acted indifferent to the creature as he swiftly defeated it, and not only that, but also devoured it in front of him as per the tradition of the warriors of Rutmash. Maiden realized that Vermico was quite strong and capable while being a decent fellow at the same time. He also helped around the guild by volunteering for hardcore tasks that others avoid, and there was no doubt that he was a great guy. But Maiden couldn't stand him based on his uncanny look that looked similar to the dragon of Stuckfit. Kim knew about Maiden's wrath toward the red dragon, since he was the specific red dragon he was chasing for years. Kim isn't used to keeping notes of the things that he keeps on killing each and every day, but there was another similarity he was sensing from Maiden. He was observing to know if Maiden was the same species as him or not. Maiden and Vermico were put up on a mission with a request of taking out the Lord of Darmarga at night discreetly with a route of patrol guards. Even though these two did their jobs perfectly, the adventurers from the other branches messed up really badly. Not only that, but they also killed Count Salambro, an aristocrat that messed up the situation. It seems that Prince Edward had planned everything a few days earlier, as he reshuffled the lords by scaring the Count of Darmarga as he used him to do it, while the rest of the lords were planned to be dead. Meanwhile, the duty of guarding the Count was given to Maiden and Vermico, but Maiden was only focused on meeting the prince. Even though Vermico could guess Maiden's wish to meet the prince as he was the hero of the Demon War, he could guess that there was something else in his mind that he was hiding. The guild master of the Santo Darmarga branch was quite happy after his return from the outside with good news for everyone in the guild, as he felt like the judgment from the kingdom was going to be in their favor. Maiden seemed rather frustrated as he kept sweating throughout the whole celebration while thinking of going face-to-face with Prince Edward. His partner Vermico realized that something was wrong with him, that's why he suggested Maiden let loose with some drinks. But he claimed that he was fine with water, and just by drinking it from the mug, he noticed something that came into his mouth. Meanwhile, when Baron Darmarga woke up from his unconsciousness, Kim dressed up as an adventurer in the room to let him know that Count Salambro died, where he was kept as a prisoner. The Baron was truly frightened by the state of Kim in front of him, and not only that, but also it was revealed that Kim had contaminated the water supply as well to make it deeper. A few days later, when the negotiations started between the guildmaster and the military of the kingdom, Maiden and his partner were in their worst physical condition. While having a conversation, Vermico revealed that he had left his child to be an adventurer, and just when he was about to finish his sentence, the guildmaster came running inside as the military leader started destroying the walls with fire spells at once. Since the walls were covered with combustible goo by Kim himself, the walls fell down quite instantly. When Maiden woke up in the chaos, Vermico informed him about the situation regarding the other adventurers going frenzy and went to look for the guild master on his own to get a hold of the situation. While Maiden was getting ready to seek revenge on the military, the guild master inside was seen contemplating as he continued to tremble in fear as Vermico reached him to call him out. He seemed like he was out of his mind as his other half of consciousness started talking to him while making him crazy. It seems that the other half of the guild master's personality was none other than Kim himself as he kept on eating out his memories and eventually his whole existence. When Kim finished consuming and absorbing the guild master, he modified himself into the serpent and instantly attacked Vermico, who was standing there witnessing everything. Vermico ends up getting saved by his partner Maiden from getting eaten alive by Kim as he escaped from there, breaking the wall and slashing through with the help of his sword. Vermico realized that over time Maiden had accepted him as a real friend instead of hating him wholeheartedly. But the moment had to end in an instant as Vermico's life get ended by the new weaponized modification of Kim's body as he pierced through his body. When Maiden was fleeing from the scene, he gets called back by Kim as he revealed himself as the Dragon of Stuckfit. After hearing the name, Maiden rushed towards Kim with the overarm formed by the powers of a shapeshifter along with the sword in his hands with the hope of avenging everyone that was ruined by his enemy. But his dream ended right there as Kim slashed through his whole body. Kim was out of everyone's reach as he gained new powers from the Manticora, and since he was sure that eating the same kind might give him more powers, but unfortunately, Maiden wasn't one of his kind. While remembering about his kind, he remembered the face of Lionhands Purecreed and the letter she left behind before leaving him. The letter of Lionhands Purecreed seemed quite normal to Prince Edward, but Kim noticed that the timing was quite off for some reason, which meant the goddess had a way to relay messages in real time. Then the topic of divine punishment came up, which meant that now they will have to face the city of the goddess. Kim realized that the city of goddess possessed a great amount of power, but if he wanted to return to Earth, Prince Edward will have to get into conflict with them anyways. When Edward seemed anxious about dealing with the city, Kim kept him in check by warning him as he already knew what it was like to betray the man who was sitting in front of him. After some moments, they finally reached the Royal Engineering Research Laboratory, the destination they desired to reach. The place was full of Demon Kingdom technologies, which made it quite important, and it was full of security guards and military in the area. After reaching the place, Kim and Edward witnessed that some dwarves were arguing with the guard to get inside the facility. Kim instantly guessed that it was from the Republic of Evermean, which was the land of dwarves, and he needed the head of the Dwarf King to go back to Earth. The leader of the dwarves requested Edward so the guard could let them in, and Edward told them it was only possible if they could dismount from their robot. Kim understood the secret behind their height and was quite surprised to see the technological advance. Just when the dwarves were thinking that the prince was being reasonable, they get tied down by the guard as Edward commanded him to do so as they get shifted into the holding cells in the facility. Edward then elaborated to Kim that the dwarves have come to take a look at a STEM engine that was once used by the demons. It was heard that the engine was used by magic gems which were quite advanced to begin with. The facility was well maintained as it was managed by Prince Edward himself as he had a brain full of knowledge that he gained from the Earth. Edward then continued the conversation, unraveling the shocking truth behind the goddess and people's belief, and they finally reached the shocking space inside the facility. The unknown space was full of people's naked brains as they were controlled by some kind of strange parasite that was able to control the humans, and the whole plan was made by Edward's old man. Kim noticed a similarity between the parasite and the general of the Demon King that he devoured in the past. Edward was planning to use the parasites to eliminate the possibility of betrayal by using the brainwashing technique, but there was still space left for improvement. After some time, Edward released the dwarves but didn't allow them to enter inside as only the outer parts of the facility were open to them. But those silly dwarves were ready to sacrifice their whole life in the cell to see whatever that was going on inside. The dwarves were only focused on the STEM engine as they begged to participate in his research, but they didn't even know what was waiting for them and their king as Edward continued to plan his master plan. Meanwhile, the Grand Canteen Kingdom's expedition party continued to plow through the former demon territory, where they discovered some kind of lever that started a big earthquake-like incident as some advanced demon technology full of demons came out of the big hole in the ground. It seems that Prince Edward was planning to unite the human nations as one because there was once a total of 5 races existing together in the continent of Elmwood. All of the races fought against the demons as one group, but just when their common enemy vanished from the scene, they could go against each other to expand their power. But that wasn't the major problem. The major problem was that all of the other races always lived together, except for the humans as they were divided into many nations. So Edward knew that it was necessary to unite the humans together to start a war and then continue to gather heads from different races of their kings. He believed in his tricks as they are well calculated as always, which can only be changed if some super ancient artifact shot out of nowhere. Even when Kim was worried about Edward, he seemed pretty confident as he had enough knowledge that he had gathered from the goddess. Suddenly, the royal assassin of Prince Edward came into the room claiming that some ancient artifact in the demon territory was discovered by the expedition party. Not only that, but also the remnants of the demon army made their move first before he was able to get his hands on it. The situation grew worse and worse each time the royal assassin opened his mouth, as according to his report, the artifact had already been activated by one of the remnants that were an archaeologist, which ended with spilling out countless demons in the process. Nervous and frustrated, noticed that there was no way other than asking Kim for his help, as he was enraged by the thought that the goddess didn't warn him about something like that. But it wasn't even her fault, as she knew that the prince wouldn't need to know things like that, as it was his own fault. Meanwhile, the kingdom's military was suffering a great loss, as they couldn't keep up with the overwhelming number of demon armies, as Lord Viron was busy making clones. Then the bad news came for the Lord, as one of his soldiers came with the news that the dragon of Stuckfit entered their land to express his wrath. While blasting away the demon army, Kim noticed that there was also an artifact carrier not far away from him. After seeing the carrier with his own eyes, Kim transformed back into his human form, and the royal assassin revealed himself in the area to deliver him a communication device that could directly connect him to the prince. When he entered the unidentified carrier, he met the remaining demon army and also the leader Lord Viron inside. When Viron started threatening Kim in his face, he grabbed the man with his modified tail and smirked devilishly, as he wouldn't need a guide to check out the carrier anymore. Kim instantly finished Viron after devouring his body, and by checking out his memories, he was able to find out the ways on his own. When he checked the cloning technology, he knew that it wasn't from the world they are in right now. After entering one of the steel doors, the place more felt like it was some kind of technology that came from the Earth. When he noticed a password-locked board in the machinery, he ended up using the brain power of some dangerous hacker who he devoured back in the past. After checking it out for a while, Kim guessed that the aircraft carrier was equipped with the technology of 2072 Earth, which was 50 years into the future from his time. Kim was able to understand that the prince won't be needing something like that for his cause, so he wanted to destroy it. But the malfunctions made by the machinery somehow clogged the system, and the whole thing blasted in the blink of an eye. When Kim woke up, he found himself lying down on the ground, but he knew that it wasn't the blast made by the machinery, as it would have been far worse if it happened for real. When Prince Edward called him through the communication device, he was lightning struck to hear Kim out, since he wasn't able to destroy the device or ship, whatever you call it. And while only one part of the ship blasted, the other half fled through the sea. More details about it came up with Kim, and Edward was scared to hear all of the things that were getting out of Kim's mouth. But after fully listening to Kim, as he claimed that the carrier must have been made in the US and it came from 2072, Edward suddenly felt ecstatic after finding relief. Edward explained that he knew the ship name US Cold Shiv, as it was made for a project named Overdread, which was run by White Veil, as Edward himself was a member of White Veil. Edward claimed to be the project a typical conspiracy theory, making everyone feel like the military was going to take over the whole world, and that was believed by almost everyone. In the middle of the conversation, the device ran out of time, and Kim was approached by the royal assassin, claiming that he had set up a hologram communication space for him. After reaching the space, Edward continued with the story of Overdread, but as he was only a field agent, he didn't know about the project clearly. But he knew much to guess that the US Cold Shiv's ultimate goals were to support the structure of power, even if they were in big trouble if the ship reached a mineral vein on the ocean floor. When Kim wanted to know about the Legion cell, Edward explained that back on the Earth in 2012, there was someone who could change his body structure to live double lives. One day when his powers were revealed by someone, an operation was launched for him which ended up killing his other family members but kept the second son alive. After securing the son, they managed to get out cells that had multiple faces, and that was why it was named Legion in the end. The cells ended up helping the White Veil's advanced superhuman creation plan. Then they only focused on capturing the original owner, but that was when they faced the real monster behind the whole picture. Edward revealed that the Legion cell is actually Kim's cell, but Kim admitted that it wasn't his but his son's cells, which led to Edward explaining that his son is truly fine, as he was adopted by an army general. Kim didn't expect his son to be free and fine, as he ruined countless lives back on the Earth, while pointing out that his son may have inherited his genes, but not his abilities, which doesn't make them the same kind. Seeing no reaction inside Kim for his son, Edward realized that he had lost his humanity completely, and there was no coming back from that. Also, as they wanted to locate the ship in the ocean, Edward didn't have any tricks up his sleeves, and Kim left the space, claiming he had to experiment with some things. The situation got Edward's feet cold, as he could guess that his time may finish up real soon if he doesn't prove his worth quickly. On the other hand, Kim had already begun experiments with the parasitic abilities of his modified body parts to look for the artifact in the ocean of Elmwood. When it had been a few days after Kim released the transformed flesh that turned into patrol fish, he couldn't stand the boredom and started fishing in the sea. When he was busy fishing and eating them, the royal assassin came with the news that Prince Edward had for him, but was astonished to see a rare fishing rod in Kim's hands. But it was just a useless fishing rod to Kim, as he found it in the nearby environment, so he ended up giving it to the royal assassin, since it was his hobby to fish for real. After revealing the information that Prince Edward asked of him, Kim instantly used his dragon wings to move to the temporary outpost, while the royal assassin gets himself busy as he began using the fishing rod to curb his hobby. When Kim reached the temporary outpost, Edward began explaining to Kim how the number of fish was declining. He thought maybe it was his doing, but Kim ended up declining the information since it wasn't done by him, as he only used his chimeras to find the lost ship. Then there was another problem, which included the Albafoon Kingdom, as it was attacked by some grotesque-looking creatures that looked like fish, which also gets declined by Kim as it wasn't done by him. The situation was so bad that Kim intended to send his fish to a distant kingdom of Albafloon to know the truth. Then finally, the question of the legendary Ocean Master 2000 came into the matter, which made the royal assassin take a leave. It felt stupid to Kim as he didn't even care about it in the first place. He decided to leave the outpost rather than listen to the yelling made by the prince. Meanwhile, when US Coldship's main eye ended up shutting down in the process of the blast, it started utilizing data on demons and the deep-sea fish collected from the ocean. By fusing them both together, it was able to create clones of fish people, which began making the life of people hell in the areas where they emerged. The whole army of fish people was able to take out the most powerful navy in the world of the Albafloon Kingdom, so that was why Kim went there to protect them as the Dragon of Stuckfit. On the other hand, Prince Edward reached the capital of the Albafloon Kingdom, Alquipale, to see King Ryan Albafloon, who was actually his uncle in relation as he was the son of his own sister. But he wasn't so proud of calling Edward his nephew as he knew the history of him being a sly prick, so he started insulting him for the work that he provided throughout the years. King Ryan seemed quite disturbed by the fish people ruining his kingdom, and when he began talking about it disturbingly, Prince Edward claimed that he will help as he had already sent his dragon to be of help in the situation. In the same instant, Kim's sight of flying in the sky along with 2 members of the Albafloon Navy gets noticed by the king as he looked lightning struck on the scene. Back in the mansion in the capital, Edward seemed rather distressed by the situation that he kept on facing for multiple days in a row as he couldn't get a bit of sleep. The conversation between Kim and Edward led them to the sleeping process of Kim and how it works, which ends up painting the monster picture of Kim even more. Edward then explained to him that he will have to participate in an official event throughout the whole day and was asking his permission if Kim could assist him with that. Kim ends up explaining the whole theory of being an apex predator as he accepted the proposal made by Kim when the king returned to the mansion. King ends up getting the same information from Edward as the gathering was going to start really soon, which will include the most influential counties among the human nations. Edward knew that his uncle was going to ask for aid from the other countries, but he wasn't interested in letting him do so. The international meetings within the Elmwood continent were hosted by the temples of the goddess, and it must be a rare occasion when the leaders gather in one place. The whole process is done via the use of a telecommunication device set up at the temple in each of the countries. Meanwhile, in the great temple of Alquipale, Edward and King Ryan presented their situation to the other kingdoms that were caused by the fish people, but even when they heard about the situation, none of them helped the kingdom in any way possible. All of the other kingdom leaders considered it to be temporary, as the only problem they thought of was the Demon King's existence. Then, when Edward brought up the name of the Demon King being involved in this situation, all of them started reacting to it, asking for a witness. Edward introduced Kim in the middle as an honorary instructor of the Holy Order of the Sword, while the Spears of Light surrounded Kim at once. Kim immediately began serving his speech to the other leaders, saying that the fish people are indeed related to the Demon King and claiming that the creatures will surely go against the will of God. He also revealed his truth by witnessing the truth with his own eyes as the Spears of Light started whooshing around him like fireflies when the speech finished. The kings agreed to make an alliance, and when the subject of being the leader came up, Edward claimed that the Albafloon Kingdom might be the best suitor, and everyone agreed along with his uncle, not knowing what Edward was up to. When the US Cold Shiv chose to attack the kingdom instead of finding the mineral, Kim turned into a giant dragon, and the act of revenge made the aircraft organize mass production of fighter aircraft. Then almost 6 months later, Edward began the battle against the monster creatures with the help of Grand Admiral Asdamil along with all their weaponry and Kim's monster power. When his steamboats returned waving the red flags, it only represented the emergency, and the recorded battle only made the Navy fear a lot more than usual. But the Admiral believed it could be their only chance to strike. Suddenly, Kim transformed into his dragon body and flew like a rocket to a greater distance. Even though Edward was trying to be confident about Kim's choices, he was truly more scared than most. Previously, when Edward thought that the octopus that was Kim's spawn might be losing the battle, it was quite the opposite, as it would not even submit to Kim himself. Knowing that their plan might be in danger, Kim transformed and took the matter into his own hand. When Kim finally landed on the US Cold Shiv, he decided to make a deal with it for the betterment of both sides. Kim tries his best to explain why he landed on the enemy aircraft, as he claimed to help it by killing the monstrous octopus. Knowing that the aircraft had a connection with Eddie Montoya aka Prince Edward in this world, he decides to use the opportunity to have a conversation after finishing his own spawn off as it got the approval. Kim immediately flew up in the sky and kept on dodging the attacks of his own spawn as he slashed through its tentacles. The flame power overwhelmed the creature quite efficiently, and Kim was disappointed to see the strength of his own spawn as it was low on resources after fighting with the bunch of aircraft. When Kim asked why the creature acted on his own, the ideology of Kim was reflecting on his spawn's actions, and Kim finished it for its own good, calling it the self-reflection. Kim thanked his defeated spawn for reminding him of his true self and proceeded to bring Edward close to the ship to form a better relationship, which only made their mission more successful. Their successful mission not only got him the alliance, but also the infinite amounts of whatever he will be needing for their future plans. When Edward asked him about his spawn, the air between them grew toxic, and Edward continued to fear for his life and decides to change the subject by bringing up the topic of a coronation ceremony next week. When the former minstrel Felina Greensmith changed her job to put an end to finding our beloved Sir Kin on her way, she decided to join the Daily Elmwood as a reporter, believing that she would meet him again. But unfortunately for her, she met the monster once again when the coronation ceremony of King Edward came up. Knowing that something bad would happen once again after witnessing him, she turned back and started running away, while the whole plaza blew up behind her, proving the fact. The explosion took the lives of countless officials and aristocrats while putting the new king into a coma. All the responsibilities for solving the matter fell into the hands of Kim, as he was the protector of the kingdom. Finally, his wrath began 3 months later as he reached the quarters of Elf Ambassador Elamia of Elphilis. When he was questioned at the doorstep, he began eradicating everyone that was nearby, while the embassy of the Elven Kingdom in Santo Omaruz blew up. It was revealed that the ambassador Elamia Elphilis was actually a spy that was sent by the Elven King, and she was the one who planned to execute King Edward. When she believed that she didn't leave out any evidence, Kim revealed that he wasn't entirely sure, so he just kept on eradicating everyone. Also, he revealed the true incident of what went on that day, as they used a clone of King Edward, and nothing happened to him. By finishing off the spy in front of him, Kim managed to get the first head in all 4 of them, while Edward was acting to be a hero in front of the whole kingdom as he continued to prepare. His acts made the reigning king Lucius Elphilis enraged, as the death of high-power elves continued to make his blood boil. When King Edward ends up revealing his true self to the Elven King, knowing that he was already his enemy, Lucius Elphilis declares war against the whole of mankind. The battle between the 2 kings of 2 races was about to begin anytime soon, as Lucius rose in front of his elven army with his temporal magic. The temporal magic separated Lucius from everyone else, since it had the ability to show him the future. Not only that, but also the facts shown by the temporal magic could never be changed with any force given. Lucius was cheering with his whole army, knowing that they would win the war as the temporal magic had shown him. Meanwhile, Edward was sure that the king himself will be facing them in the front line, as they had killed his sister, knowing the fact that the elves maintain pure blood through incest. He considered it a great opportunity for Kim to test out his new abilities to face his enemies with destruction and despair. While reaching for Santo Omaruz, Lucius was surprised to see that the human army was barely trying to defend their capital at all, as they kept on running. But his prediction wasn't any close to the truth, as Edward had something else planned for them. Edward had planned to do something out of the world with magic beforehand. As transformed dragon, Kim came down flying in front of the Elven King and his army. His newly modified version was the scariest version, as the body had the abilities of various creatures. None of them could guess what was attacking them, while the identity of the creature stayed unknown to them. When the king led his army to use their shield, it didn't even stand a chance in front of Kim's acid enriched with acid slime for a second, since their spell was useless against it. Then finally, the real fire breath came down crashing on them, and then Lucius finally understood what he saw through the temporal magic. Since Lucius was the one who brought down the calamity on his own, he decided to finish the war on his own. As he went up midair, he used his magic spells on Kim. Lucius' attempts proved to be futile, even though he tried his best to take down the monster that was aiming its claws at him and his elite army. Little did he know that the monster came from the other world, and his magic wouldn't work on him. King Lucius met his death after using his time dilation spell on Kim, as he crushed him down with his feet. When Edward's soldiers were cheering for Kim's win, Edward was losing his shit, knowing that the same could happen to them one day, which wouldn't be so nice. On the other hand, Prince Lucian was living in solidarity with nobody beside him, since his life was full of failure. The only great achievement of his life was slaying a Hydra, which was nothing in front of the dragon his younger brother had slayed. When he came to the realization of his power, he agreed to be the senior policy advisor of the kingdom, which was just for show. When Lucian finally was able to put aside his obsession with the art of letting go, the news of his brother's defeat came rushing in like a god's plan to make him the new king. Even though he was shocked to know what had happened to his brother and his army, he knew who had the ability to commit something heinous. Although he was overwhelmed by the surprise that he was spared the crown for being the purest in the High Elf. On the other hand, Edward was still losing his shit, witnessing the wrath of Kim again and again. He explained the formality that Lucian had arranged for them to announce their surrender, and they traveled to the Elven Kingdom. Emperor Edward was so cunning that he was able to change the mind of Lucian to change every rule in the Elven book with the help of an ultra-white substance by provoking him with words and drink. The set of keywords worked like a drug inside Lucian, and he announced the result of the meeting to his audience of High Elven. The egoistic audience wasn't ready to admit, even after losing thousands of elite armies and the previous king. They kept on humiliating their new king with the words of blasphemy in their own king's presence, which triggered quite badly inside Lucian. Lucian's overpowered anger got so out of control that he used up his water-circulating magic spell to teach the man a great lesson who criticized the king. He smeared the guy on the ground by evaporating all the water in his body as he prayed to the goddess. That was the instant when the future tyrant of Elphilis was born with the help of Emperor Edward. After the decapitation of Lucius, Edward decided that he should target the dwarves next, but knowing that the Republic of Evermean is an ally of their kingdom, he should make preparations for a total of 6 months. Since Edward wouldn't need Kim in the meantime, he decided to take a vacation in the Great Forest, the place where he first got to after arriving in the New World. After searching through the first dragon that he devoured in the forest, he could anticipate that none of his abilities would help him survive in the depths of the forest. So he started his devouring journey once again, as he began with an eyeball bunny. It took a total of 1 week to make the perfect camo to catch the creature, and he headed into the depths. Even the beginning of the journey inside the depth was so cursed that his body was sliced into various sizes with every step he took by a dangerous lancer slime. Kim kept on experimenting with the slime by vibrating and tearing off his body parts, and devoured it whole as it got into his range. Meanwhile, the paladin in Lionhands Purecreed and a sanctus candidate from the temple, Anna Fulfrumheven, was looking for the reason why the lizardmen had vanished. Knowing that an orc village existed nearby, they decided to start questioning their not knowing who was currently residing inside the forest. The unexpected events that kept on happening with Kim made him realize that he might have been a little too complacent, which indicated he should reevaluate his skills in the forest. He kept on practicing with his newly found Lancer Slime abilities on dragon-like creatures in the Great Forest as he could sense himself growing stronger. Meanwhile, the old Onyx where the orc clan resided had nothing but ashes everywhere as it was full of graves and fresh flowers. Lionhands Purecreed and her companion were found by Vrat the Wanderer of the Onyx orc clan, who then explained what had happened in their land. She was confident that the one who destroyed the lair of lizards was the same person who made an evil plan to eradicate the orcs. It seems that Vrat the Wanderer was wandering and traveling through the forest when the car which was carrying Kim and the others crashed into their world with a tree. He couldn't understand how a carriage was running without horses, but he found everyone dead inside with their necks snapped as they wore odd armor. That was the beginning of all the ruckus inside the Great Forest as the trolls and lizardmen continued to get missing. Lionhands Purecreed could guess that there was no way he could know whatever that was happening since he was wandering, so Vrat took her hand in order to show whatever actually happened by touching the same knife that had the blood of the dragon child. Lionhands Purecreed sensed the temporal magic in him as she could clearly see everything that happened, but Vrat called his magic psychometry, which can view embedded memories in an object. Vrat also knew even though the monster left the forest long ago, he returned quite recently by using the mind resonance on the knife that could track his location. On the other hand, Kim was wandering and chasing everywhere with the hope of reaching the very top of the ice-capped mountain to meet the ice dragon that had adapted to the depths of the Great Forest. The conversation made the sanctus candidate Anna the time when she met her fair share of the monster Lionhands Purecreed and Vrat was talking about. Even though she was claiming that she was all right, the memories that were rising inside her brain out of nowhere every now and then, which was filled with Kim's terror. Meanwhile, Kim was walking in the depths of the Great Forest in the Arctic region as he was hankering for the powers of the ice dragon. He changed himself into a dragon himself as he went inside the lair of the ice dragons to devour all the children of the sophisticated dragons. Seeing the unfathomable sight of the monster, the ice dragon couldn't keep his anger closed inside him and released his ice breath on Kim. Unbelievably, when Kim consumed an ice dragon, he understood the most efficient ratio for the biological antifreeze solution in order to finish off the enemies. One by one, all of the dragons continued to fall down instantly in front of him, and the only target he had left in front of him was inside the volcanic region of the Great Forest. On the other hand, Lionhands Purecreed and her companion were in between the line of both regions along with Vrat as they were following the steps of Kim. Then by following the steps, they finally came in front of the monster that they were desiring to meet the whole day to take their revenge on. The volcanic region of the Great Forest was filled with unknown and mysterious creatures due to the constant shift of the geography due to the melting ground. Nobody except for Kim was able to stand there to experiment with the creatures, and that was why he was able to take advantage of them. By using the salamander scales and parts of all the various monsters that he had devoured in the forest, he stood inside lava as he noticed the unique group that was following him through the forest. Lionhands Purecreed instantly recognized her master, and when Vrat tried to run into Kim to defeat him for annihilating his clan, Kim revealed such an insane scene of the chief that made him lose his shit. Then, when enraged, Vrat engaged Kim in a fight with the body that he trained for years to defeat the monster that he was looking for. The uncanny and heavy fight made Lionhands Purecreed confused as she didn't know whom to help in the fight, as one of them was rightful and another one was her own master. Knowing that she couldn't make the decision, she decides to stay away as she took Anna into her arms to get away from their fight as Kim finally released the deadly venom. Vrat was surprised to see the cowardly state of the opponent, but he stood still to put one last strike on his opponent, which didn't even tear through Kim's skin. Anna was desperate to help Vrat the Wanderer, as anyone should have considered that to be the greatest act. But Lionhands Purecreed knew the limits of their strength as they were nothing compared to her master. She wasn't going to let Anna die in his hands. Suddenly, the ashen and burned to a crisp body of Vrat the Wanderer fell in front of the two of them as they were trying to run away. Behind them, Kim was walking right at them with heavy feet with the hope of taking his time to talk with his apprentice along with an evil smile. Sensing that they both were in trouble, Anna swiftly jumped away from the embrace of Lionhands Purecreed as she was enraged by the fact that Vrat was killed by him. But Lionhands Purecreed barged into the conversation to save her for the being with the hope of explaining it later to her. Kim revealed stories about the human that he thought was the same kind as his own, and Lionhands Purecreed acted as if she was interested in listening to his stories to sway the hostility. Suddenly, the name of Maiden Halfian started banging in Anna's ears, which ended up revealing that the person was actually her brother, and she was the sister he thought he lost during the attack. Myron, the sister of Maiden, the half-elf and half-demon, started looking for her brother after losing an arm, and knowing that he had traveled to the land of humans, she did the same. On the way, her blood had attracted the temple, and they made her as they wanted to do so while giving her a cloned arm, with no memories of the past. By the order of the temple, they both were headed to the Great Forest for Anna's pilgrimage, not knowing what was waiting for them. When she heard about the news of her brother's death, Anna was furious and enraged to attack Kim, but Lionhands Purecreed knocked her in case anything bad was about to happen. Lionhands Purecreed wanted to go away from Kim as much as possible, since her attempt of contacting the temple had proven to be futile. She started talking about not betraying her master, but Kim wasn't focusing much on the idea and ordered her to follow him to a shallower location. The lands of the Lizardmen were considered sacred because of the long-tailed full-form heathen, as he was a paladin made by the goddess, and after reaching the Lizardmen village, Lionhands Purecreed contacted the temple successfully. The uncanny questions made by the executive director for Paladin Operation and Management made the situation between them weirder with each moment that passed. Kim had expressed that he had scared Lionhands Purecreed and Anna while he was on his vacation in the Great Forest while taking out the whole Lizardman's lair. He also promised to leave the goddess temple Paladin and Sanctus alone safe and soundly, knowing that the other way would have been a loss for the temple. It seems that Anna was actually listening to both of them secretly without letting them know anything. However, Kim was too focused on his goal of reaching the new landmark of abilities by devouring newer creatures, while the Emperor continues to lay the groundwork to go after another king's head. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.